In the heart of a sprawling glass tower that kissed the skyline of the city, lived Alexander Reese, a man whose name echoed in the boardrooms and stock markets like a thunderclap. A billionaire by achievement and a loner by design, he was known more for his cold eyes and rigid principles than his philanthropy or charm. His penthouse was sleek, minimal, and efficient, just like him. Every corner of it reflected power, order, and wealth. And into this cold perfection stepped a young maid named Clara, hired through an agency to assist during the sudden medical leave of his regular housekeeper. Clara was quiet, respectful, and meticulously hard-working. With a navy blue uniform and hair always tied in a neat bun, she floated through the halls like a whisper. She never spoke unless spoken to, never left a room without wiping every surface twice. But Alexander noticed something one morning that disturbed the perfect order of his world. She was standing in front of the fridge, staring inside, holding a small bottle of milk. He stood in the doorway, watching silently, arms folded tightly across his chest. She didn't notice him at first. She was too still, too lost in thought. When she turned and saw him, her eyes widened. She immediately closed the fridge and looked down, her hands trembling around the bottle. "You were checking the fridge," he said, voice flat and sharp. Clara nodded, her lips parted but no words came out. "This is not part of your job," he continued, his voice growing colder. "My house is not a place for charity." Clara swallowed hard. "I'm sorry, sir. I wasn't stealing. I just—" But Alexander raised a hand, cutting her off. "You're dismissed. Collect your things." The words hung in the air like a sudden frost. Clara stood still for a moment, then slowly placed the milk back on the shelf and closed the fridge. She didn't beg, didn't argue. She simply nodded, then turned to leave. But just before she reached the door, she stopped and turned slightly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I wasn't stealing, sir," she said quietly. "I was just checking if there was any milk. My son hasn't had any in 2 days. I wanted to see what kind you buy so I could tell him stories that he drinks the same milk the rich people do." Alexander blinked. Clara continued, her voice trembling but steady. "He's 7. I told him we work for important people. He thinks I'm important too, because I clean for them. I wanted to bring him a story." Then she smiled, a tired, bittersweet smile, bowed her head gently, and walked out. Alexander stood motionless. The door closed behind her, and the silence returned. But this time, it felt different, heavy, suffocating. He turned and looked at the fridge. The small bottle of milk sat there, untouched, ordinary. He remembered something then, a long-forgotten memory of his own mother, warming milk on a stove in a cramped apartment, telling him stories about kings and castles and heroes, even when there was barely enough food for both of them. She made poverty feel like magic. It was those stories, and that warmth, that had pushed him to become someone. And now here he was, a man with too much, firing a woman who only wanted to make her son feel special. Without thinking further, Alexander grabbed his coat and rushed out the door. Clara was walking slowly through the parking lot, her bag slung over one shoulder, wiping her eyes with her sleeve. She turned around when she heard his voice. "Clara, wait." She stopped, startled. Alexander approached, out of breath, something softer in his eyes now. "Come back inside." She hesitated. "Sir, I didn't mean to." "I know," he interrupted, his voice gentler now. "I'm sorry." She stared at him in disbelief. "I was wrong," he said. "I judged you without listening. That's not how I want to treat people. Especially someone trying to give their child hope." Clara looked down, unsure what to say. "Come inside," he repeated, more warmly this time. "You and your son. I think, he deserves more than a story about milk." That evening, Clara returned, this time not as a maid, but as a guest. Her son, Leo, a bright-eyed boy with shoes slightly too big and wonder in his eyes, stood in awe of the grand kitchen. Alexander knelt down and handed him a cold bottle of milk with a smile. "You know," he said, "I drink this exact one every morning. It's what strong people drink." Leo's eyes lit up. "Really?" "Really," Alexander nodded. "And I heard you're strong too." The boy giggled, holding the bottle tightly like a treasure. Later, as Clara and Leo sat at the table and shared a warm dinner prepared by Alexander's private chef, Alexander sat across from them, watching quietly. Something in him shifted. For the first time in years, he felt something more than profit margins and deadlines. He felt connection. Humanity. Grace. In the following weeks, Alexander didn't just offer Clara her job back, he gave her a full-time position with better pay, flexible hours, and health benefits. But more than that, he started spending time volunteering with single-parent organizations, donating anonymously to food banks, and visiting schools in low-income neighborhoods. He told no one about Clara's story. But it stayed with him. It reminded him that sometimes, the smallest moments, a whisper, a glance in a fridge, a bottle of milk, can break open even the hardest hearts and remind us who we once were, and who we still have the power to become. And in that simple act of kindness, a billionaire regained his soul.